You've walked past them your entire life, maybe thousands of times. They sit on almost every street corner in America, painted red or yellow, squat and heavy, and completely ignored. The way we ignore fire extinguishers until something is burning. A fire hydrant. You probably haven't thought about one since you were a kid running through the spray on a hot summer afternoon, and even then you weren't thinking about the hydrant. You were thinking about the cold water on your face and the sound of summer. The hydrant was just the thing it came out of. That's how most people think about it their entire lives, as background, as street furniture, as something that exists for other people to worry about. But here's what nobody ever tells you. What you saw that day wasn't even close to what a fire hydrant actually is. That open spray from the side cap, that was the polite, neutered version they let civilians play with. The controlled experience. The version carefully managed so you don't flood basements, blow out tires, or knock a grown man flat on the pavement from 30 feet away. What lives inside that cast iron shell, the real pressure, the real volume, the real system underneath it, is something most people are completely unprepared to understand. And when the tap has gone dead and your family's already asking what's for water tomorrow, that ignorance could be the difference between finding a supply 3 blocks from your front door and dying of dehydration in a city surrounded by infrastructure you never learned to read. The average municipal fire hydrant in the United States sits on top of a water main carrying anywhere from 40 to 150 pounds per square inch of pressure. That number sounds clinical until you hold it against something you've actually touched. A standard garden hose runs at 40 to 60 psi, and you've seen what that does when someone takes their thumb off the end. The spray that stings, the arc that reaches across a yard. Now multiply that by a 3-inch diameter outlet and remove the thumb entirely. A fire hydrant at full flow doesn't trickle, it doesn't stream, it erupts. A single standard hydrant can discharge between 500 and 1,500 gallons per minute, depending on the main it's connected to. That is not a drinking fountain. That is a controlled detonation of water. And if you approach it without understanding what you're dealing with, it will demonstrate exactly how little you understood. But here's what 99% of people will never know. A fire hydrant doesn't just contain water. It contains 4 distinct things that turn it from street furniture into a survival gold mine. 4 things with 4 completely different access points, 4 different levels of difficulty, and 4 different payoffs if you know how to reach them. So let's start with number 1, the water column itself. Because not all hydrants are the same design, and mistaking one type for the other in a real emergency is the kind of mistake that doesn't just cost you time, it costs you the window. There are 2 fundamental types operating across America, wet barrel and dry barrel. Wet barrel hydrants dominate warmer climates, California, Texas, Florida, the Gulf Coast, the Deep South. The name tells you exactly what you need to know. The barrel, the vertical body standing above ground, is always full of water under full line pressure. Every moment of every day, right up to the caps, that thing is loaded and waiting. There is no staging sequence, no underground valve to coax open, no water that needs to climb from anywhere. Open a side outlet valve on a wet barrel hydrant and water flows immediately. The kind of immediate that will soak you through before you finish the sentence. Each outlet has its own independent valve, which means you can open one side while leaving the other capped, managing flow without touching the operating stem at the top. Wet barrel means instant gratification. Turn a valve, get water. The system is as simple as it looks. Dry barrel hydrants are the dominant design across the northern United States, anywhere the ground freezes hard in winter, from the Midwest to New England, the Mountain West to the Great Plains. In a dry barrel system, the water doesn't sit in the above ground portion at all. The main valve is located underground, below the frost line, sometimes 4 or 5 feet below street level, sitting at the base of a long standpipe that runs through the concrete and soil below you. The barrel you see standing in the street is, at rest, completely empty. You could unscrew the cap on a dry barrel hydrant that's never been opened and look straight down into a hollow pipe. Nothing. When you open a dry barrel hydrant, you're turning an operating stem that runs all the way down through that standpipe to a valve shoe underground. And only when that valve opens does water begin rising up through the barrel towards you. Dry barrel means you're turning a long stem and waiting for water to climb up from 4 feet underground like it's waking up slowly, filling from the bottom, rising towards the outlets. And if you crack it open too fast before you know what's down there, you're asking for trouble we'll get to in a moment. This underground architecture is what prevents freeze damage. The barrel drains after every use, so there's nothing to freeze. And it's also what makes the dry barrel hydrant a fundamentally different animal to work with under improvised conditions. The wet barrel rewards you quickly. The dry barrel makes you earn it. And the dry barrel is the one you're most likely to encounter if you live north of roughly the 35th parallel, which covers roughly half of the American population. Know which type you're standing in front of before you commit to opening it. In warm climate cities where you see wet barrels, look for the multiple valve handles, one per outlet, rather than a single operating nut at the top. In northern cities, almost everything you see is dry barrel. The single pentagon nut on top of the bonnet, which we'll get to shortly, is your indicator that there's a long stem below and the valve underground waiting to be turned. Number 2, the drain mechanism. And this one is worth stopping on because it's the most underrated diagnostic tool in the entire setup. A small automatic weep valve at the base, part of the same mechanism that opens and closes the main valve underground, drains the barrel back into the surrounding soil every single time the hydrant closes. And because it works every time, it leaves a trace every time. Walk up to a dry barrel hydrant in your neighborhood right now, any one of them, and look at the ground around the base. If you see soil that stays consistently damp in dry weather, damp that has nothing to do with rain or street drainage, damp that seems to have no rational source, that is the weep valve trace. That hydrant has been used recently. In a scenario where you're moving through a neighborhood trying to identify live versus dead mains, that wet ring around the base of a hydrant is the closest thing you'll find to a neon sign that says, "Water here." Conversely, if the soil around the base has been bone dry for weeks, packed, dusty, cracked, the hydrant either hasn't been used in a long time or the main beneath it has lost pressure. A main that's lost pressure doesn't feed the weep valve. The cycle stops, the soil stays dry, and a hydrant connected to a dead main is just expensive cast iron standing in the street. 30 seconds of reading the pavement around the base could save you 40 minutes of fighting a hydrant and getting nothing. In a situation where your energy is finite and your time window is closing, that 30 seconds is not a small thing. Imagine this. 2 guys, same neighborhood, same blackout, 48 hours in. The first one walks straight to the nearest hydrant and spends 40 minutes fighting it. Wrong tool, wrong assumptions, grinding at the nut, getting nowhere, before he finally accepts that the main went dry 12 hours ago. The second guy does something different. Before he touches a single hydrant, he walks a 3-block radius checking the ground around every base he passes. Takes him 2 minutes. Dry at the first one, dry at the second. On the third, he crouches down and presses his palm to the concrete. The ground is cold and damp in a ring around the base, soaking into the pavement in a pattern that has nothing to do with the weather. He pulls his wrench, works the stem properly, and water is rising in the barrel before the first guy has given up on hydrant number 1. He's filling drums while the first guy is still standing there with sore hands and empty containers. Same street, same information in the ground in front of both of them. One read it, one didn't. Now number 3, the pentagon nut. And this is the one that makes people genuinely angry when they find out. Not at the system, not at the utility companies, but at themselves for never noticing it in 30 years of walking past these things. The problem, and this is deliberate, by design, and protected by law in most jurisdictions, is that the nut isn't a standard hex or square shape that any socket set in America could engage. It's a pentagon, 5 sides. A 5-sided nut machined to a specific dimension sitting on top of one of the most water-rich pieces of infrastructure in every American city or suburb. You will not find a pentagonal socket in any standard toolkit in any hardware store in the country. You cannot improvise one cleanly with a crescent wrench or a pair of pliers because the geometry actively resists it. The nut is specifically shaped to cause conventional tools to slip off under torque. This was not an accident of industrial design. It was an intentional engineering decision made to create a physical barrier to unauthorized access, and it works with a remarkable consistency. Most people assume hydrants stay closed because of the legal risk of tampering. The real barrier isn't the law, it's the shape of the nut, and almost nobody knows that. The tool you need is called a hydrant wrench, sometimes a spanner wrench, sometimes a hydrant key depending on who's selling it. Fire departments carry one on every single apparatus. Water utility vehicles have one in every truck. In the civilian world, you can buy one legally without any permit online and at specialty hardware or fire supply stores for somewhere between $15 and $50 depending on quality and handle length. A hydrant wrench with a properly sized pentagonal socket and a long handle for mechanical advantage weighs under 2 pounds, takes up less space than a paperback book, and is the literal physical key to one of the most abundant emergency water sources in any American city or suburb. If you are building an emergency preparedness kit and you do not have a hydrant wrench in it, you have a gap that is genuinely difficult to overstate. Now, what if you don't have one? Because in a real emergency, most people won't. A large pipe wrench, the kind with the aggressive, serrated jaw designed for iron pipe, can grip the pentagon nut by clamping across multiple flat faces and using the jaw's serration to bite into the metal. The harder you pull, the tighter the grip. This works better in practice than a standard adjustable wrench, which tends to lose purchase on the pentagonal faces and spin off under torque, skinning your knuckles and accomplishing nothing. Neither option is clean, neither is fast, and both risk rounding the nut faces over time, which matters if you intend to use that hydrant repeatedly or if you want other people to be able to use it after you. But if the choice is rounded nut faces versus no water, you round the faces. Once you have the nut engaged, direction, counterclockwise opens, clockwise closes, for almost all hydrants in the United States, with some exceptions in older systems. In doubt, apply gentle counterclockwise pressure and feel for movement. You'll know immediately whether you're fighting the mechanism or working with it. Here is the part that people rush past and regret. Opening a dry barrel hydrant to full flow requires somewhere between 10 and 20 complete rotations of the operating stem before the underground valve reaches full open position. Half turns only. Slow is the protocol, because impatience at this stage doesn't just waste water, it could cost you the entire main. A hydrant that has been sitting unused for weeks may have sediment at the valve shoe underground, debris in the barrel, or weakened joints in the surrounding pipe. Opening the stem too quickly creates water hammer, a hydraulic pressure wave that moves through the connected pipe at roughly 4,000 feet per second as the suddenly moving water column slams at fittings, bends, and joints. Water hammer is how you rupture an old main. Water hammer is how you send the cap flying off a side outlet at dangerous velocity. Water hammer is how you turn a working hydrant into a depressurized liability in under 3 seconds. Number 4. The outlet caps and threads, and what they tell you before you run a single drop, and how to turn them from a sealed port into a managed fill operation. A standard American fire hydrant has multiple outlets built into the barrel, most commonly 2 smaller hose connections, 2.5-inch diameter, fitted with NST threads, which stands for National Standard Thread, the standardized coupling system adopted across American fire departments in the early 20th century, so that any department's hose could connect to any city's hydrant. These are the capped ports on either side of the hydrant body. On many hydrants, particularly older municipal installations, there's also a large pumper connection on the front face, 4.5 inches, designed to connect directly to a fire engine's intake pump and deliver massive volume fast. That large port is not your target in an improvised scenario. For practical water collection, you want the 2.5-inch NST outlets. They're controllable, they're hose compatible, and they're sized for gear that actually exists outside of fire stations. Before you open anything, read the caps. A cap that threads off cleanly tells you this hydrant has been maintained within recent years, serviced, lubricated, checked. A cap that's corroded, seized, or packed with grit around the threads tells you this hydrant has been sitting untouched for a long time, and the outlet threads underneath may be in equally poor condition. Damaged outlet threads mean you cannot reliably attach a hose coupling, and without a coupling, you have an uncontrolled stream at full line pressure coming out of a 2.5-inch port doing whatever it wants. The caps themselves are removed with a spanner wrench, a hook or pin wrench that engages lugs cast into the face of the cap. Without one, a hammer and flat bar tapped counterclockwise against the lug will usually break the cap free. Work in short, controlled taps, not swings. You're overcoming corrosion and thread friction, not trying to break the lug off, which leaves you with a cap you can't grip at all. This is where a gated Y fitting changes everything. A gated Y is a Y-shaped splitter, threaded onto the 2.5-inch NST outlet in place of the cap, and each branch of the Y has its own independent shutoff gate valve. Costs about $10.
With it in place, open the hydrant operating stem slowly until the system is pressurized and water is ready at the outlet, both gate valves still closed. Now open one gate valve, fill your first container at a controlled rate, close that valve when full, swap containers, open again. The hydrant operating stem stays open the entire time. The main stays pressurized. You control the flow at the collection point rather than cycling the main valve up and down. Fill, close, swap, open. Clean rotation, no water wasted, no pressure surges, no scrambling. Without the gated Y, you are playing a very wet, very unforgiving game at 60 plus PSI with no pause button. With it, you are running a fill operation with the same level of control you'd have at a spigot. $10. Buy two. Now the part that ties all four together, and the part most people find out about one day too late. Municipal water systems don't stay pressurized when the grid fails. They coast on stored energy, and that stored energy has a hard limit. Pressure in most American cities is maintained by two things working in parallel: gravity-fed elevated storage, water towers, and electric pump stations pushing water through the distribution grid. When power fails, the pump stations go offline immediately. They don't taper. The pumps stop, and from that moment, the towers are carrying the entire load alone. A water tower works purely on gravity. The tank is elevated so the weight of the water above creates pressure below, roughly 0.43 psi per foot of elevation. As the tower drains through normal system demand, people flushing toilets, running taps, the pressure drops. Depending on tower size, zone size, and consumption rate, a fully charged tower might sustain serviceable pressure for anywhere from several hours to 2 or 3 days after a pumping failure. And here's the thing nobody tells you and nobody announces. When the towers drain and pressure drops below functional threshold, nothing goes off. No siren, no emergency broadcast. The water just stops. You turn on the tap one morning and the pressure is low, a thin stream where a strong one used to be. A few hours later, nothing. The window before the towers drain is real. It is documented, and it is the single greatest time advantage available to anyone who understands it. In the first 12 to 24 hours of a major grid failure, if you move in that window, before the towers drain, before the pressure drops, before anyone on your block has processed what's actually happening, a single fire hydrant with a wrench, a gated Y, and large containers can fill hundreds of gallons in under an hour. A 55-gallon drum fills in roughly 45 to 60 seconds at a managed 2.5-inch flow. 6 drums is 330 gallons collected in under 10 minutes of actual fill time. At 1 gallon per person per day, that's over 3 months of supply for one person, or a month for a family of 4, collected during a window when most neighbors haven't realized there's a problem. The window is real. It is finite, it closes without warning and without mercy. One final thing, water quality. Hydrant water during normal pressure operation, during that first window, is municipal tap water, treated, chlorinated, tested for federal standards. Collected in clean food-grade containers, and it is the safest water you are likely to have access to for the foreseeable future. The concern begins when pressure drops. A main that loses pressure can experience backflow. The pressure differential between the pipe interior and the surrounding soil pulls groundwater and biological contamination in through cracks and compromised joints. Water pulled from a system that has experienced significant pressure loss should be treated before drinking, no exceptions. One rolling boil for 1 full minute eliminates essentially every biological pathogen relevant to American water supplies. At elevations above 6,000 feet, extend that to 3 minutes. Household bleach at 5 to 8% sodium hypochlorite, 8 drops per gallon for clear water, 16 for cloudy, 30 minutes contact time. FEMA protocol. It works for biological threats. It does not address chemical contamination, heavy metals, petroleum products, industrial runoff. For that, you need activated carbon filtration at minimum, and if serious chemical contamination is a realistic concern in your area, you need an alternate source entirely. Read your local infrastructure the same way you read the ground around a dry barrel hydrant. Use what's visible to understand what isn't. 4 things. 1 hydrant, a pressurized connection to a water system that has been sitting 3 blocks from your house your entire adult life, locked behind a 5-sided nut that a $15 wrench opens in seconds. The water doesn't know the grid is down. The pressure doesn't care who's running the pump station. The main is either live or it isn't, and now you know how to find out before you touch a single tool. The pentagon is either in your kit or it isn't, and now you know exactly what that costs. Buy